A few years ago, something very weird happened. My best friend and I were 15 years old. One night, we decided to sleep over at his house. After watching scary movies, we were in the mood to do something exciting. Not far from his house was a demolition site. A whole block of houses in terrible condition, scheduled to be torn down the day after tomorrow. The local government was clearing them out to make room for new buildings. The entire site was fenced off, warning signs hung everywhere. Do not enter. The houses were boarded up with planks, doors and windows sealed shut. No one could get in. We decided to take a walk through the old block. Just explore a little, take some random photographs. My friend knew a spot where we could slip inside. But when we got there, every single house was boarded up tight. No way in. On the top floor of one house, it wasn't boarded up very well. We could see straight into the room. So we took a photo. Just one photo. With a digital camera. Later that night, we went home and looked through the pictures we had taken. We scrolled through them casually until we came across that photo, the one of the window. There was a woman, dressed in a brown raincoat, white skin, long black hair. As far as we could see, she looked very, very sad. We hadn't seen any woman up there when we took the picture. And the windows, the doors, everything was boarded shut. We went back the next morning just to be sure. We checked every single board, every single nail. Everything was sealed tight. There was no woman. There couldn't have been a woman. To this day, we have no explanation. This next story isn't mine. It belongs to a friend of mine from Japan. I'll call him Rita. It happened when Rita was only around 11 or 12 years old. Rita was a fairly attractive kid and had his fair share of admirers. But one girl took things to a very different level. I'll call her Ayano. Ayano was much older than Rita. She was 17. She was an acquaintance of his, lived just down the road. Rita hadn't thought much of her until she started stalking him. Every day. Every night. She was following him, one way or another, whether in person or online. The first time Rita really felt the creeps was when she began messaging him over 20 times a day. Things like, "Be safe. Are you all right? Sleep well." Strange. But he overlooked it. At first. Then the messages started getting worse, more personal. Things like, "You should eat your lunch," on days he skipped lunch, or, "I think your sister is hungry," when his little sister was crying at home. Rita stopped using his phone, stopped using social media entirely. But it didn't end there. Rita's mother was almost never home. So he was often looked after by babysitters. One day, he had a new babysitter. It was Ayano. Nothing seemed particularly strange at first. She looked after him and his siblings, but she got a lot closer to his mother than he ever felt comfortable with. Then one day at school, Ayano approached him. She told him his mother would be away out of the country for a full week, that she had personally asked Ayano to let Rita stay at her house. Rita hesitated, but it was his mother's wish. He couldn't go against that. Ayano told him his mother had already left, so he should come home with her after school that day. Reluctantly, he agreed. When he arrived at her house, her parents weren't home. Things get a little blurry here. My friend choked up when he told me this part of the story. Even now, it still scares him. He said Ayano would make him play strange games. Games like Family, where she insisted she was the wife and he was the husband. Games like Cops and Robbers, and games designed to see who would get scared first, where she would blindfold him and leave him alone in a silent room. For hours. 5 days into staying at her house, Ayano left for her part-time job. She had locked all the doors. The windows were too high to jump from. So Rita stayed in front of the television, and then he saw it. A news report. A missing child report. The missing child was him. Before he had time to catch the number on the screen, the television switched off, and Ayano was standing directly behind him, remote in hand. Rita broke down, crying, screaming. Ayano grabbed him, but he twisted free just in time. He threw open a window and screamed for help. Luckily, a couple happened to be walking past. They heard his cries. They called the police immediately. Within an hour, the police arrived. They found him locked in her bedroom, blindfolded, hands tied. Rita is unsure of exactly what happened to Ayano after that. He only remembers the police leading her away while his mother held him tightly. He eventually moved to Australia. He has never seen his kidnapper since. But even now, he still flinches at the sound of her name. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major U.S. city. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself restless and bored after my roommate, who was very much not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I would go for long walks alone, just thinking, wandering. I spent 4 years doing that, walking alone at night, and I never once had a reason to feel afraid. I used to joke with my roommates that even the drug dealers in our city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. I was walking near a police-patrolled park, quite a distance from my apartment. It was a quiet night. Very little traffic, almost no one on the streets. The park, as it usually was at that hour, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street to loop back toward my apartment. And that's when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side of the road, was the silhouette of a man, dancing. It was a strange dance, something like a waltz, but at the end of each movement he would dip forward into a slow, deliberate stride. He was headed straight for me. I figured he was probably drunk, so I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him space on the sidewalk. But the closer he got, the more I realized something was off. He wasn't stumbling, he was moving gracefully. He was very tall, very thin and lanky, wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could finally make out his face. His eyes were open wide, wild, his head tilted slightly back as if he were staring up at the sky, and his mouth was twisted into a painfully wide cartoon smile. I crossed the street. I kept my eyes down for just a second to navigate the road safely, and when I reached the other side and glanced back, I stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing. He was standing perfectly still, one foot on the edge of the street, perfectly parallel to me, facing my direction, still looking skyward, smile still stretched across his lips. I started walking again, faster now, but I kept my eyes on him. He didn't move a single inch. Once I had put about half a block between us, I looked ahead briefly to watch where I was stepping. Just for a moment, less than 10 seconds. When I looked back, he was gone. For the briefest moment, I felt relief. Until I spotted him again. He had crossed the street, and now he was crouched slightly in the shadows, facing me. I couldn't be completely certain from that distance, but I was sure of it. And then he started moving toward me again. Giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps, like a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to tell you that I ran, or reached for my pepper spray, called someone, did anything, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen. As the smiling man crept closer and closer, then he stopped again. About a car's length from where I stood, still smiling, still staring at the sky. When I finally found my voice, I tried to sound commanding. What I meant to say was forceful and sharp. What actually came out was a whimper. A small, terrified, "What the?" But he didn't react at all. Not even a flinch. He just stood there smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and began dance-walking away. Just like that. I didn't dare take my eyes off of him. I watched him walk until he was nearly out of sight, and then I realized something was wrong. He wasn't walking away anymore. The shape of him in the distance was getting bigger. He was coming back. And this time, he was running. I ran until I was back on a main road under the streetlights with traffic passing by. I looked behind me. He was gone. I never went out for another late-night walk for the rest of the 6 months I lived in that city. And what haunted me most wasn't what he did. It was his face. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that is a very, very frightening thing to see. In the mid-'80s, my mother worked as a cleaner in Australia. She cleaned houses in suburban and rural areas, sometimes out in wine regions. She got most of her clients through business cards she left at local shops or through word of mouth. One day, she received a call from a woman who sounded to be around 60 years old. The woman wanted my mother to clean her old farmhouse. She had a lot of unusual demands. Normally, my mother would always meet a client before taking on new work. But this woman refused to meet. She said she would simply leave the keys under the front doormat. My mother agreed, mainly because the woman was clearly quite wealthy and was offering to pay far more than my mother would normally expect. She arrived at the house on a Monday morning. She already felt uneasy during the long drive up the driveway. The house sat essentially in the middle of a vast empty property. She found the keys, let herself in, and began cleaning. About an hour in, she heard the back door slam shut. She had been told no one would be at the property. She stood completely frozen in the kitchen. She said it felt like 3 or 4 minutes of silence. Nothing else. No footsteps, no voices, no other car in the driveway. She wanted to leave immediately, but she had 2 rooms left, both bedrooms. As the silence stretched on and nothing happened, she slowly convinced herself that maybe it had been nothing. Maybe something had simply fallen. She walked up the hallway and stepped into the bedroom. Covering the bed were black and white photographs. As she got closer, her blood ran cold. The photographs were all of her. Some were taken at our family home, others at houses she cleaned. Some appeared to have been taken through windows, others over fences. She used the house phone to call the police. Then she drove to the end of the driveway and waited. The woman was investigated. She continued to insist it was a break-in. Someone else must have put those photos there. Eventually, the police stopped pressing. And 4 months later, we moved to a new town entirely. I'm 22 years old, and this happened just a year and a half ago. I had just moved into my very first apartment and was still in the process of settling in. The door to my apartment locks itself automatically when it closes. I had stepped out briefly to collect my mail from the building entrance. While talking on the phone with a friend, I came back, sat on my bed, and started going through the mail while still on the call. My phone slipped from my hand and landed under the bed. I lay down on the floor to reach for it, and as I stretched my arm underneath, on someone under my bed, a person, lying completely still, back toward me, head tucked down toward their chest. They hadn't seen me yet. My mind flooded with thoughts. I choked back the urge to scream. Instead, I picked up the phone calmly and said, "Sorry, I just dropped my phone. I'm going to take a quick shower and call you back." Then I walked casually to the bathroom right beside the bed, quietly locked the door, turned on the shower, climbed out of the window, and called the police. They told me to wait across the street and watch for anyone leaving the building. I crossed the road, hid behind a parked car, and watched. My friend arrived just before the police did. I handed my keys to the officers and they went inside. Moments later, 2 officers came out gripping a thin, hollow-eyed man. He looked exhausted, vacant, but he didn't resist. The officer who stayed with me told me what they had found. The man had been standing outside my bathroom door with one of my own kitchen knives, waiting for me to come out. He had slipped in through the entrance while I had stepped out to get my mail, crept into my apartment, and hidden himself under my bed. He was later placed in a psychiatric facility. To this day, I think about how close it was. I was 21 years old. Me and my girlfriend were staying at my family's vacation mobile home during a heavy snowstorm. We were curled up on the couch by the heater, watching late-night television. Nothing around us for miles except forest in every direction. The only thing keeping the outside world out was a wooden door with a broken lock. My grandfather had placed a few cinder blocks against it as a temporary fix, since the door swung inward anyway. My girlfriend started shaking my arm. She said she heard something outside. I told her it was probably just a deer or a bear, something like that. 5 minutes later, I heard it too. I muted the television. We listened carefully. It was coming from the small mower shed outside. Whoever or whatever was making that sound, they would have seen my car parked outside. They would have seen the lights on inside the mobile home. If there was a person out there, they knew we were in there. My girlfriend wanted me to go outside and check. I told her she had to be joking. After a while, the noise stopped. Just the storm, nothing else. After a few minutes of quiet, I felt brave enough to kill the inside lights and peek through the blinds. Too dark to see anything. I flicked on the porch light. There were footprints in the snow. Not animal prints, shoe prints. Headed toward the backyard, I pulled open the curtains to the backyard window. My girlfriend screamed before I could. Standing in the darkness of the backyard, facing the window directly, was a man dressed entirely in black, wearing a Guy Fawkes mask. I shut the blinds instantly, told her to run to the bedroom. I pulled my grandfather's hunting rifle from the closet, pushed the cinder blocks and everything else I could find up against the front door, and went to hide with her in the corner of the bedroom. A loud bang hit the front door. He was trying to force it open. A few more bangs, and then silence. I stayed awake the entire night, rifle across my lap. In the morning, we packed immediately and left. Outside, there was a fresh trail of footprints leading from the front window, deep into the woods. I have never gone back. Back when my grandmother was still alive, I would walk down the block to her house every day to help with chores. One afternoon, I arrived at the usual time and let myself in. I was surprised she had left the door unlocked. She was a deeply paranoid woman, the kind who kept everything bolted at all times, but the door swung open. From upstairs, I could hear her. Her bedroom door was open, and I could hear drawers being opened and closed. I called out to her and started climbing the stairs. When I was about 5 feet from the bedroom door, she slammed it shut. I knocked, asked if everything was all right, and at that exact moment my phone rang. It was my grandmother's number. Confused, I answered it. She was on the other end, cheerful, telling me not to come over today because she was already on her way to her seniors club. My heart stopped. I hung up before she could say another word. I kept my voice completely steady and called out through the closed door. "Okay, Grandma, I'll just wait for you downstairs." I walked calmly to the kitchen, picked up a knife, and dialed 911. The bedroom stayed perfectly silent. When the police arrived and burst through that door, a gunshot rang out. When the paramedics wheeled out the intruder on a stretcher, I recognized the face. It was my grandmother's next-door neighbor. He had seen her leave, broken in to search for jewelry, and was hiding just inside the bedroom door with a large knife in hand, waiting. If I had walked through that door, I would not be here to tell this story. This is the most haunting memory of my life. My wife and I were returning home from dinner. The moment we stepped out of the car, we noticed the front door of our house was standing wide open. I told my wife to stay outside. I went in alone, went straight upstairs, loaded the shotgun, and began clearing the house room by room. Every room upstairs, the main floor, the basement. Nothing. No one. Nothing missing. Nothing out of place. The police came. They investigated. Found nothing. They asked us several times whether we were sure we had shut the door when we left. I began to doubt myself, but my wife was certain. The officers concluded that if someone had broken in, they hadn't stayed long. No signs of burglary. They left. My wife was shaking. I held her and told her whoever it was had already gone. We were safe. Eventually, exhaustion won and I fell asleep. Then my wife screamed. I jolted awake. She was staring at the closet. It hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had forgotten to check the second closet. For just a fraction of a second, I saw a face. A man peering out from the closet door, before pulling it slowly shut again. Within 5 seconds, I had the shotgun raised and cocked. The click of it loading echoed through the room. I screamed at him to come out. The closet door swung open, and instead of surrendering, he ran. He bolted straight for the front door and disappeared into the night. He was never caught. I believe having that gun in my hands is the only reason my wife and I are still alive. About a year ago, while I was still living with my parents, I started experiencing something I cannot explain to this day. Late one night, lying awake in my room, I heard a slow creaking sound from across the bedroom. My closet door had opened by itself. I got up, checked inside, nothing, shut it, and went back to bed. Later that same night, a low rattling sound from above the ceiling. Something moving in the air ducts. Strange, but it stopped, and I fell asleep. I told my dad the next morning. He wasn't interested. The following night, the closet opened again. This time I felt genuinely afraid. That door required someone to physically twist the knob to open it. I checked inside thoroughly. Nothing. I told myself it was a broken latch and tried to sleep. The rattling in the ceiling came back, exactly as before. This continued for 3 nights in a row. My dad checked the door and found nothing wrong with it. He assumed I was leaving it unlatched. I knew I wasn't. On the 3rd night, I sat up waiting. Right on cue, the closet opened. I waited for the ceiling sounds, but there was only silence. I turned on my lamp and looked up at the air vent, and I screamed. 2 wide, unblinking eyes were staring down at me through the vent slats. My parents rushed in. I told them everything. They looked at each other and said I was overtired, seeing things, imagining it. But I was not imagining it. I know what I saw. I live in the Poconos with my wife and kids. There's a small lake about a 1/4 mile from our backyard. We used to go there all the time for swimming. Used to. Last Saturday, we set up chairs on the little sandy bank along the shore. My kids, 6 and 8 years old, were splashing around and laughing. My wife and I sat in the sun. After a couple of hours, she got tired and walked back home. I stayed with the kids a little longer. The sun was beginning to set. I called to the kids to come in a little closer. They didn't hear me, so I stood up and moved toward the water. That's when I saw it. A black, rounded object in the water, moving, drifting steadily toward my children. I ran in, grabbed them both, and pulled them to shore. When I turned back to look at the water, it was gone. I didn't tell my wife at dinner that night, but the first couldn't stop thinking about it. After the kids were settled, I grabbed a flashlight and walked back down to the lake alone. It was fully dark by then. I swept the beam across the surface of the water, searching, when suddenly, a large splash erupted somewhere in the middle of the lake, the kind of sound something makes when it rises out of the water. I moved the light frantically across the surface, back and forth, and then the beam landed on something near the far bank, a silhouette, humanoid, standing upright in the shallows, long black hair hanging completely over its face, just standing there, still, facing me. I dropped the flashlight and ran. I didn't stop until I was back inside my house with the door slammed shut behind me. I haven't told anyone, but what terrifies me most is this. That lake is only a quarter-mile away, and as I sit here writing this, for all I know, it's watching me right now.